Across the history of Cardassian civilization, successive states have grappled with the problems of the resource-poor, out-of-the-way geography of the local stellar neighborhood in which they have found themselves, enjoying varying levels of success depending on a variety of factors. The Cardassian Union of the 24th century was no different in this, though it could be argued that it emerging after centuries of chaos and hardship, in a galaxy much more connected and close-feeling than ever before, that their problems this go-round were more severe. Facing these severe resource shortages, shortages of trained personnel, limited industrial capacity, and a tech base which started decades behind neighboring powers, the Union would choose to build generally smaller, technologically simpler, and more basic ships than comparable designs in the Klingon, Romulan, and Federation fleets as a rule. The most well-known example of this policy would be the Galor-class cruiser, a class which, while it acted as the center of the naval forces of the Union, was far smaller than the flagship classes in other navies, though it would be built in impressive numbers and see multiple design revisions. The standard Galor measured in at 372 meters long, 192 meters wide, and is 59 meters tall, with a maximum speed in later revisions of warp factor 9.6. Crew complement for the ships was a minimum of 200, with 300 being more typical when in service. The class also had the ability to carry several hundred troops and some light ground vehicles, or use the space to carry shuttles or cargo as the situation demanded, therefore increasing its utility to the Union. Across all variants, the Galor was armed with 8 spiral wave disruptors, 4 and aft torpedo launchers, and 1 heavy disruptor cannon mounted below the ship's command hull. Ultimately, 7 mainline variants of the class are known to have been produced, with a further 3 recognized variants being more specialized ships built in smaller numbers. The 4th and 5th series ships would be built with Dominion assistance, and would largely replace earlier ships, having much increased capacity. The Series 7 was introduced post-war, and represents an effort to produce a more capable, though more expensive design than the wartime variants to better serve the new Cardassia, and is a notable departure from Cardassian norms. By the 2320s, the Cardassian Union had managed to overcome a long period of endemic poverty, resource shortages, civil disturbance and disorder, as well as societal unrest, creating a new state centered around the good of the community, and the Cardassian state as a whole, with obedience and service to the state being required of all citizens. With all resources under the control of the central government, the Union began a program of naval expansion in the 2330s, constructing a series of new classes intended to fill out the fleet to a level that could aid in the expansion of the Union's territory and available resources, as well as deter any neighboring powers from taking issue with the Union's expansion. This first generation of ships were quite poor, featuring outdated technology, primitive designs, and basic capability when compared to classes in service elsewhere. But given the, at the time, basic level of Cardassian technology, the ships still represented an impressive achievement for the time. More importantly, the design and construction of these ships would help expand the technical capabilities of the Union's industrial base. By 2339, this combination of experience and increased capability would be put to use, with several new designs prepared for a new generation of ships to bring the Union's military to a level where it would be competitive with its rival neighboring powers, such as the Federation and Klingon Empire. A trio of new warship designs were prepared, with the intention being to produce 5 classes, with a battleship, large cruiser, long-ranged light cruiser, short-ranged light cruiser, and a light warship to act as a scout and patrol ship, all proposed and accepted, with design programs beginning for all 5. The heavy cruiser would begin its final design phase in 2341, with the program being given the name Galor after a famous warrior from mythology the next year. A prototype phase would begin in 2339 with the construction of the first vessel of the class, which would complete its trials after an accelerated construction program, and with the cruiser Galor being accepted into naval service. Mass construction of the class would begin in 2344, with the first ships entering service a year later. The Galor building program would have a short time to filter out into the fleet before the Union became embroiled in a rapidly escalating border conflict with the Federation. By 2347, only 20 ships of the class were believed to be in service by Starfleet intelligence. Given the capabilities of the class, especially compared to what came before, it was surprising then that in the early tense standoffs along the border and in orbit of contested worlds, Cardassia would deploy a majority of their Galors into theater. The conflict would escalate rapidly. After 3 years of intense diplomatic back and forth and standoffs between warships of both parties in the contested areas, with Cardassia gradually escalating the situation by attempting to stop civilian vessels belonging to the Federation in deep space as they were en route to colonies in the region, this being in flagrant violation of commonly accepted international law. The Union's press would argue that, as the Federation had illegally seized those worlds from Cardassia, that they were simply exercising their right to enforce their territorial integrity against invasion. Despite these provocations, it would not be until 2351 that open fighting would break out. In that year, a Galor of the Third Order attempted to stop a Federation-flagged merchant en route to the planet Seljuk II, not realizing that she was being shadowed by the Miranda-class USS Brilliant in expectation of just such a situation occurring. In a terrible miscalculation, the Cardassian captain would fire on the merchant and take fire in turn from the Brilliant. In the brief battle which ensued, both ships would take significant damage before Brilliant limped away in the face of several Cardassian reinforcements. The border wars would enter a deadly new phase from here until a stalemate was reached in 2368, which would last until a treaty was concluded in 2367, as both sides reached a point where there was no way to further escalate the conflict short of open war, something which Cardassia could not hope to survive, and which would prove very unpopular in the Federation. During the war, the Galor proved itself to be roughly comparable to the Federation's SLEP 2 and 3 upgraded Excelsiors, though they struggled against later versions of the class, as well as later cruiser designs such as the Rigel, Renaissance, and others in service during the early period of the war, and would lag badly behind the capabilities of the new generation of cruisers which began entering service after 2356. During the conflict, the Galor would be produced at near wartime levels as the Union struggled to overcome Starfleet technological superiority with numerical superiority in the combat zone. Over a dozen ships would be lost during the wars, with at least 40 ships badly damaged. Production at this high level would continue after the conflict ended, with the Galor seeing its first major revisions in 2368, with the first of the Galor B entering service. This new variant featured much improved capabilities thanks to advances made during the border wars. Higher warp speeds at both cruise and max, superior firepower, better shielding, all this powered by a new, more compact, yet more powerful warp reactor. Initially hoping that the signing of a treaty resolving the border with the Federation would allow a period of peace to rebuild, the Union would quickly find itself heavily committed to dealing with the Maquis, former Federation colonists who found themselves on the Cardassian side of the border against their wishes, and who took up arms in resistance to the sovereignty of the Union. The popular support the Maquis enjoyed in the Federation, along with tensions resulting from the withdrawal of Cardassian forces from the Bajor system, and the subsequent opening of the Bajoran wormhole would result in tensions rising once again. These tensions would flare into a disastrous series of conflicts shortly after the discovery of the Dominion on the opposite side of the Bajoran wormhole. With the loss of a joint Romulan-Cardassian fleet comprised of ships belonging to the Romulan Tal Shiar and the Cardassian Obsidian Order in a Dominion trap soon after the discovery, causing much loss of life and leading directly to the collapse of the Central Command and the restoration of the Detapa Council to authority in Cardassia itself. Soon after that, the Klingon Empire, believing that Cardassia had fallen to the influence of Dominion agents, launched an invasion of Cardassia, intending to remove founder influence in their own words. The war would last well over a year and be devastating to the Union, which saw most of the fighting within their territory, with Klingon forces devastating many Union worlds and destroying much of the fleet due to their technological and numerical superiority. The now weakened Union, under the leadership of Gul Dukat, bitter over their attack and being once again brought to their knees, would formally join the Dominion, allowing a large Jem'Hadar force to enter into Cardassian space from the Bajoran wormhole. These forces would quickly push back the Klingons to the pre-war border, leaving the Klingon fleet in a now badly weakened state. The Dominion would make good on many of their promises. Aside from pushing back the Klingons to the border, they would rapidly begin to restore the Cardassian military and infrastructure, establishing extensive fortifications and sharing technology to improve the capabilities of the fleet. It would be with this help that the Union was able to nearly completely wipe out the Maquis, who had been existing virtually unchallenged in the demilitarized zones since the inception of the war with the Klingons. All of this construction would turn Cardassian space into a bastion, a fortress, with frequent reinforcements from the Dominion only adding to the apparent strength of the Union, upping their abilities as never before, a fact which would play directly into the start of the Dominion War. Galors, now majorly improved with Dominion technology and entering service in ever larger numbers, would go on to play an important role in the conflict. Acting in concert with Dominion ships, the Galor would see combat in nearly every battle plane of the war, from Deep Space Nine to Cardassia Prime. The war would prove to be the pinnacle of the success of the Galor, seeing such widespread service as it did as the now standard fleet unit of the Union, totally replacing the smaller cruisers and frigates initially built alongside it. The ship would come to represent the Union, becoming an iconic part of the war, seen as a universal symbol of the Union by both the Allied and Dominion forces alike. By the war's end, the Galor had achieved the dubious honor of being possibly the most produced cruiser class in service in recent galactic history, beating out contenders such as the Federation's Excelsior and the Klingon Ktinga, this being due in large part to Dominion manufacturing techniques and alterations to the basic design to allow for mass manufacture. Supporting the argument that this honor was not an endorsement of the ship's capabilities as a warship, the Galor also bears the distinction as the cruiser class to have the most ships lost of any in recent galactic memory. Post-war, the new Cardassian state has retained the Galor in service as its mainline cruiser, though efforts have been made to both upgrade the ship yet again, as well as replace it as the flagship class with newer, more capable designs. However, with the new state being on decent but still tense terms with many of its neighbors, it is unlikely that the ship will be withdrawn from service in any significant capacity anytime in the near future. Seeing service for half a century and showing no signs of slowing down, the Galor well represents the middle-of-the-road cruisers of the galaxy. Being not the most powerful ship of its age, but being ideally suited to the needs of its builder, and a solid enough performer in most categories to serve well. And despite the ship's usage on the losing side of the most destructive conflict in recent memory, the Galor will likely continue on as an enduring symbol of Cardassia and its people, both within and outside of its borders. Thank you very much for watching this video. The Galor is a really cool design that I really like. I don't think it gets enough attention. In fact, Cardassia as a whole, I don't think gets enough attention from the, do we call them nerd or sci-fi community? I don't know. I think Cardassia is a really, really compelling country. Most of the races in Star Trek are portrayed as very sort of one-dimensional. All Romulans are evil, conniving, stab you in the back, but befriend you. You know, they're very one-note. The Ferengi are money-hungry. Whether or not that has negative connotations to historical stereotypes from Earth, we're not going to get into that. The Klingons are biker space samurai and have the most metal aesthetic ever. The Borg are the Borg. And then you have the Cardassians that are much more interesting, much more intricate. They're very, very well written. And I really, really like them. They also have very cool ships. They're different, they're alien, but they're also grounded. I will also say, Gul Dukat is probably the best villain Star Trek has ever had. And I've seen the Voyager episodes with Red from that 70s show. And Wrath of Khan. He is very, very good. And I just... Deep Space Nine is so, so good. And the Next Gen episodes that kind of introduce the Cardassians are so, so good. I really like it. Also, they're never shown as incredibly powerful. Like, Cardassia is never really presented as this big bad and, oh, we really have to fear them. They're more pointed as these people that, yeah, in theory, we could wipe them out easily. But we're not, because we have principles, and they know it, and that's what makes them dangerous, kind of thing. And I enjoy that immensely as a storytelling technique. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed making this video. This is about the third script revision for this video. It's over 2,000 words. We're going to let it sit there at over 2,000 words. But yeah, the first draft was like 2,700 words, and I trimmed it down and reworked it. Also, the artwork for this I'm really happy with. I wanted to have another picture, but just ran out of time. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. If you did like the video, you can like it, to leave a comment, feel free. There's a Patreon. All of the artwork from this video is on the channel's Patreon. It's not, the artwork on Patreon, you don't have to be a member to get it. I've made it to where that's free. Anybody should be able to download it. If you can't, obviously tell me and I'll try to fix that. But there's no paywall for that, unlike other content. If you do want to join the channel's Patreon, then there is a couple of perks that you have available to you. You get videos a little bit early. You get sort of behind-the-scenes looks. You get monthly votes on what topics are going to be covered. Like this video was voted on by the Patreons. So it's there. And just you get a look at what videos are coming up. I mean, like, there's a couple of little things as a thanks, and Patreon isn't much. I really don't like charging people ridiculous amounts, but it's there should you want it. Yeah, I mean, I've run out of stuff to say. It's late. I've been writing and doing this on my day off, and it's been fun, but also exhausting, so I'm going to bed when this is done editing. Oh, I have to edit. I'm not going to bed.